All right, in this video, we're going to look at the difference between inclusive and mutually exclusive events. So as you can see here, I've got a definition of inclusive events, and that's events that can occur at the same time. And an example would be being a boy and a basketball player. So you can be a boy and a basketball player at the same time. You don't have to be, but you can be. So inclusive means it is possible. So let's take a closer look at this diagram here, just so you understand what's happening. So I'll highlight in red. This is actually, let's just do this. This whole circle, the red circle, are basketball players. So all of these are basketball players, boys, girls, whatever. So those are all basketball players. And then the green circle is going to be boys. And so all of these that I'm highlighting are boys. They could be basketball players, they could not be basketball players. But the part in the middle that is blue, that's where those two overlapped. And those are all that apply. So that is the boys and the basketball players. Sorry, let me say that again. I didn't say that well. Those are the people who are boys and basketball players at the same time. The overlap, you have to be both in the boys circle and in the basketball player circle. So let's look at a couple spots in here. This black dot might represent LeBron James. So we'll call that LBJ. That's LeBron James. He is a boy, and he is a basketball player. Sticking with the celebrity athletes, we'll say this is Sidney Crosby. He is a boy, but does not play basketball. He's a hockey player, if you're not familiar with Sidney Crosby. And then basketball players, we'll just keep it with some famous people. We'll say this is Maya Moore. So Maya Moore is a quasi-retired professional basketball player. She played for the Minnesota Lynx, and is at the moment retired, may come back at some point. But anyway, so you don't have to be a basketball player to be in the green circle. My son, Charlie, is a boy, and he does not play basketball, as does my son, Eli. He's also a boy and doesn't play basketball. So any boy who's not a basketball player would be in the green part. Any boy who is a basketball player would be in the blue part. And any basketball players that are not boys would be in the pink part. So if we had somebody right here, that would be not a boy and not a basketball player. And so, this might be just sticking with the first athlete that comes to my head. So we'll say Katie Ledecky. I don't know if I'm spelling her name right. Katie Ledecky is a very famous swimmer. She broke a bunch of world records and won a bunch of gold medals at the last Summer Olympics. So Katie Ledecky is not a boy. She's not a basketball player, so she wouldn't be in either of those circles. All right, so hopefully that explains how this Venn diagram works. Mutually exclusive events are things that cannot occur at the same time. So an example might be being 25 years old and being a teenager. If you're 25 years old, you're no longer a teenager. You can't be both at the same time. So if you notice, these two circles do not overlap, and they cannot overlap because there are no people who would be in both situations. So on the outside of these circles, that would be somebody, like if I focus on this dot that I created right here, that would be somebody who's not a teenager and is not a 25-year-old. So that would be myself. I'm 40 years old. I don't fall in either of those categories, so I would be outside of those two circles. All right, so next, let's look at a couple examples and make sure we understand the difference between inclusive or exclusive. So what you have to ask yourself each time is, can these two things happen at the same time? And even if it's just once, then those would be inclusive. If it can never happen at the same time, then they would be mutually exclusive. So could somebody be a teacher and a fisherman? Sure, There's lots of teachers who like fishing, so this would be inclusive. Could a number be an odd number and an even number at the same time? And so we got to think, is there any exception to this rule? Are there any odd numbers that are also even numbers at the same time? And the only one that I'm kind of questioning is 0. Is 0 an odd number or an even number? And by definition, it would be considered an even number, because 0, an even number is something where if you divide it, or I don't know if 0 is odd or even. I'm not sure. But there are no even and odd numbers at the same time, so this would be mutually exclusive. Now I'm getting really deep and philosophical here. Could you be a homeowner and live in an apartment? So this one's a little bit tricky. If you live in an apartment, you're renting. If you're a homeowner, you own the home. Could you be both? And the actual answer is actually yeah. You could live in an apartment and own a property. Nothing is precluding you from doing both at the same time. You might live in an apartment but then own 6 houses because they're investment properties or something like this. So this would be inclusive. And then you are presently in Minneapolis and you are presently in Iowa. And I looked it up. There's no town in Iowa called Minneapolis. So you can't be in both Minneapolis, Minnesota, and in Iowa at the same time. It's just not physically possible. So this would be mutually exclusive. All right, and that's it for inclusive and mutually exclusive events.